So first question, my book discusses a common problem people in my field have, getting other people to act upon their research results. UX practitioners, user experience practitioners, conduct studies with potential or existing users of products. Findings from these studies, if implemented during the development phase, are known to help products become more useful and usable. The challenge UX practitioners have is that many engineers, marketeers, and executives believe that UX research is an extra cost that can be saved since their intuition leads them to make the right product design choices. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Well, I think you're talking really fundamentally about understanding your audience, and understanding your audience is fundamental to any campaign, whether you're selling toothpaste or whether you're electing a political candidate or you're arguing a case in court. You have to understand the group that you're presenting to, and because in the end they're the decision makers. And so a few years ago I was doing focus groups on healthcare, and the number one cited reason why we need universal healthcare in America, the cited example was Canada. And the number one cited example of why we don't need universal health care in America was Canada. And so what people do is they'll take the result and they'll use it to confirm what it is they want to believe. And so when you go in there with your biases and you're not understanding your audience and they feel and understanding their perspective, then you're going to put yourself in a position where you're deemed a failure. Because in the end, the decision maker decides whether or not your product will be successful, whether that's a case or a toothpaste or your next innovation technology. And I think one problem that I see with computer technicians and engineers in general is that there's a lot of assumed knowledge. And so when I turn on a computer, I want to push the button and I want to type my next book or my focus group report. I don't care about the gigabytes and the hugamagwerts, and I don't want to know the language. And so by the end of a conversation with a computer technician, I usually want to throw the cord over the door and hang myself, because they've spent 30 minutes explaining things that we pay them to understand. And so all that assumed knowledge without understanding where I'm coming from, I think is the fundamental barrier to product success.
What is the most basic advice you can give a user experience practitioner who's dealing with stakeholders who don't understand or respect the UX research process?
Well, before you can persuade, you've got to get people to listen. And so breaking through, just getting them to hear what you have to say, I think is fundamental. And so if I walk into the Democratic National Committee and say that, let me tell you why George Bush was a terrific president, it doesn't matter what I say for the next 2 hours. They've shut down, they've turned off. And so, if the messenger is critical to that process. And so just getting people to listen is sometimes your biggest hurdle. And so one piece of advice I give people is to recognize their predispositions. If I walk in and I say, I know that there are a lot of times where you think that the research process is flawed or the qualitative process is flawed. And so you let me know as we go through this where your concerns are. Now at least they're listening. And so when you're recognizing fundamental predispositions, you're getting someone to agree, because the best... it's always easiest to convince someone of something they already believe. And to the extent you can recognize those predispositions, then you can redirect them and get them listening. And once they're listening, you can begin the process of persuasion.
What can UX researchers do differently tomorrow morning to change the situation that we're talking about?
Can you, with respect to...
To dealing with difficult people, something practical they can do right now.
Just one little piece of advice. I take the buts out of your sentence. And what happens is the minute I start saying but, or I don't disagree with you, but, I've set up a defensive listener. And so if you say, I think we should go with blue, I could say that's absolutely, that's a great recommendation. I think we should also consider green. Or if you say, I think we should go with blue, I'd say, I don't disagree with you, but green's better. Or you can say, let me tell you how it is. Everyone hates, let me tell you how it is. Because there's this assumption that your opinion now is less valid. And we all have egos. We all want to be right. And so to the extent you set up the right context going in, you create a much better environment for your idea to be heard. And so getting others vested in your success. If you're sitting at a table with a group of 4, and I say, it's like Tomer said earlier, you're now listening more. And if you said something I agreed with, I make you right, and that gets us marching all in the same direction. And it's not disingenuous. I really agree with your opinion. But the fact that I said Tomer made this observation, and I think Charles was saying something similar, and so I believe we should go there. I've now got us all on the same side, marching in the same direction. So wake up tomorrow morning and try that.
Some stakeholders tell me that they feel researchers try to manipulate them with research results. What's the difference between persuasion and manipulation?
Well, manipulation, I mean, you can cajole somebody, you could trick somebody, but that's not real persuasion. Persuasion is the creation of consensus from conflict or indifference or no idea at all. And so it's a positive. And persuasion done appropriately can move mountains. You can create all kinds of new directions and new products and things. And so persuasion is really the creation of consensus. Manipulation is tricking somebody, and I don't think that's ever a good thing.
What is the power of silence, and how does one best use it in a persuasion situation?
I was on, I've been doing some television surrounding the book, and I do some commentary now and again, and a television commentator asked me about silence, and silence in television is deadly. 5 seconds feels like 5 hours. And so she said, talk about the power of silence, and I did this. She started speaking. She wanted to fill that void. You actually take control by understanding and using silence, and reporters are masters at it. They sit and they nod. And what they, one reporter told me, and I agree with them, was, first people tell you what they think they should say, and then they tell you what their soundbite is, and then they tell you what they really think. And so that silent nod, just that calmness, really establishes you as a leader. It also gets to the truth more often than not.
Many UX practitioners get emotional when they negotiate with their stakeholders. They feel underappreciated, they're angry, frustrated, and depressed. What can you recommend to these practitioners?
Get over it. This is it's an ego issue, and that's not a bad thing. We all want to belong. We all want to be part of the team. We all want our ideas heard, and so persuasion is both an art and a craft. The art is your idea, and you're going to feel vested in that idea, and it's important that you do, because that passion is part of the reason why you're successful. With that said, there is a craft to be learned, and everyone can learn that craft of persuasion. And so rather than getting frustrated, understand the craft, get your idea heard, and then the merit of your idea will rest or fall based on the strength of the idea.
Tell me a little bit about your book.
27 Powers of Persuasion, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Borders before they folded, is a really practical day-to-day guide for communicating better. And so, the average person gets 6,000 requests for their attention every day. If you look at, a T-shirt or this watch or my book or that water, you just look or Google behind me, everybody's trying to brand. everybody's trying to get your attention, and so people aren't paying attention like they used to. And so, if you look down at your napkin, there's branding on it. You go up the elevator, there's branding on it. There's news being delivered. There's somebody trying to garner your attention. And so we're getting selective ADD. We're not paying attention anymore. And so this book is really a practical guide. It's not filled with studies and quantitative things that you're trying hard to relate to your daily life. It's full of practical examples, simple tools, techniques to get your ideas heard better, to break through all of that noise and get your opinions heard, and then eventually allow you to become more successful in your professional and your personal lives.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.